Welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations, your authority in navigating the world of homeschooling diverse learners. Featuring Peggy Ployer from SPED Homeschool, Annie Yorty from AnnieYorty.com, Leilani Melendez from Living with Eve, Stephanie Buckwalter from eLARP Learning, and Dawn Jackson from Dawn Jackson Educational Consulting and Tutoring. With over 75 years of combined homeschooling expertise, experiences, and perspectives, this group is eager to share their wealth of wisdom to empower your homeschooling journey. So grab your favorite mug, settle in, and get ready for insightful discussions, valuable insights, and practical tips. Give your homeschool the power boost it needs to successfully educate the unique learners in your home.
Hi everyone.
Hi,
I want to welcome everyone today to Empowering Homeschool Conversations. I'm Dawn Jackson, one of the co-hosts, and I'm just so happy to be here today. I just want to ask this question. If you're looking for a safe community for your diverse learner and you want to know if a co-op is a good fit for you today, this is the podcast for you. So if have you ever felt once bitten, twice shy from the trauma of rejection from a past experience in a co-op, this is a podcast for you today, because today we have Molly, where are you? Kitzmiller, Pamela Kafer. Is it Kafer or Kafer?
Kafer. Mm-hmm.
Kafer. And Hannah Larson here from the Homeschool Community Builders team to share some thoughts about how to find the right community for your family. And I know personally that I have talked to many homeschool families that I coach with children with special needs, that question always comes up because we want to get that piece into their learning, that community piece, and they struggle with it. There's a lot of questions about how do they proceed, what should they look for? And today we are going to share some of those, actually your expertise on that. So in that field. So, all right, let's see. We're going to get along here. And I just wanted to ask you ladies, how did you start this? I'm curious myself. How did you get into this part of your really mission that God has put in your hearts? How did you start this? Where did this come from?
Well, I can I can try to speak for all of us. We have been, each of us, homeschooling for quite a while, and Pam and I specifically have had experience kind of leading different kinds of groups. We led a mom support group. We have led our co-op, and then Hannah is a director of our co-op, and so we had this sense that there just wasn't a lot of support for homeschool leaders, and that there really is a need for more cooperative efforts, because homeschooling on your own is very difficult, and even more so with a special needs learner, I would think. So our passion is to try to equip homeschool leaders to start co-ops, give things that they need to know before they go and start a co-op, help them along the way. And so we kind of started this podcast together, knowing that we have different gifts, the three of us, and that in order to guide other people, you have to really, as a leader, pull in other people around you, because you can't do it on your own. And that's kind of the message of a homeschool co-op. Let's not do this homeschooling thing on our own. We want to do it in community. How can we do that well? And we feel like community makes our experience homeschooling so much more effective, more joyful, more doable. And so we try to encourage people to establish communities that, we're going to be talking about this later, but that would welcome people that learn differently. Because that community piece is so important. If you want to last as a homeschooler, you have to have support. So anyway, we can talk more about what that looks like specifically with diverse learners, but that's where we're coming from.
That's a really great point. Can someone explain what is a co-op? For those maybe people who are, they've heard the term co-op, but they don't exactly know. And I know it's different co-ops can be run differently, but how would you say that are the basics of a co-op and what someone can expect from that?
You have to have people.
What's that?
You have to have a group of people that come together for a common goal and purpose. And that can look any number of ways. It can be academic, it can be social, it can be electives or fun things, fun gatherings. I mean, there's nature group co-ops and academic co-ops. It can be parent-led, it can be drop-off. I mean, there's any number of ways it can look, but ultimately it's a group of people that are coming together for a common purpose and goal. And in this instance, it's to homeschool our kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And to build a support network, within that group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so we're going to continue on here, and I wanted to ask you if a family or a person is looking for a co-op that supports diverse learners, what do they need to ask? What do they need to look for, and what are the questions they need to ask? What are some good questions to ask along the way?
I think one of the things that we've found is one of the very first things, and something that we talk to a lot of the new leaders who are building their homeschool co-ops, is to figure out what is their mission and vision for their co-op. And so if you have a diverse learner, and it can be a scary thing to come into a co-op not knowing if these people are going to support you or if they're going to be on the same mindset as you when it comes to how and the way that you learn. So starting off with figuring out what is your mission for your family and your vision, and then making sure that it aligns with the vision and the mission of the leadership that is at the co-op that you're going to. I think that's a really good place to start. And usually, like for us, one of the things that we do is we have people come in and we do an interview. And the whole purpose of the interview is to make sure that we are in alignment with those things. So it's really good that's a good place to start right there.
Yeah, I like that.
One of the things
I think that's really important, Pam, because if you have a learner that needs a lot of freedom to move, maybe, or that your child maybe doesn't have the reading skills, you're not going to want to join a co-op where the goal is to maximize the academic output of this child, and they have to sit still and focus, in a kind of strict environment. That's not going to be a great match. And it's okay that somebody runs their co-op that way. It's just good to know up front, excuse me, if your child is going to fit or not, because you don't want to try to fit them into a place that is the wrong environment, and vice versa. The co-op doesn't want to invite students in if they don't have the mission to serve them. So,
or the heart, right?
Or the heart, exactly.
Or the knowledge,
or the resources.
The resources. I mean,
yeah,
that's a good point.
Sometimes the heart is in the right place, but there lacks the resources or the know-how to meet the needs of some diverse learners. And that's not to say that there can't be equipping along the way. I mean, that's what you do, Dawn, right? You equip teachers and parents. But you want to make sure that you're doing it well for these students, not just fitting them in where it's going to be a struggle the whole time.
Right. I think one of the ways that a parent can do this, and leaders of co-ops can do this better too, is by asking a lot of questions right up front. For a parent, you might want to ask about that educational philosophy or their behavioral policy,
Mhm.
because oftentimes diverse learners need to be regulated in different ways than somebody who's not a diverse learner. And so if that behavior policy and if does not fit, then that's something that you need to discuss up front. So on both sides, asking lots and lots of questions.
Mhm.
One of the things that we promote within what we do is parent-led co-ops. And so it's a community of people who are all families, which can be a good and a bad at the same time,
It can be
because
hard.
it can be hard because everybody has their own opinions of how they want to homeschool, how they want to run their classes,
Mhm.
and very strong opinions. That's why we are homeschoolers, right?
Mhm.
But
Yeah, it's true. It kind
parents,
of goes hand in hand a little bit
yeah.
there.
It
So,
does.
but parents need to know, how long are the classes? How long is the day? Do they have breaks? What is acceptable? What is appropriate for the type of co-op that they have? So going in, and as far as a co-op leader would ask questions too, like what are the needs of your student?
Mhm.
Are they able to sit quietly and observe? Do they
Mhm.
need to move? Do they need frequent breaks? What do we do if somebody becomes dysregulated? Things like that. So start by
Mhm.
asking about those questions.
I think it's really important too for a parent who is wanting to take a diverse learner to a community, to a co-op, that they have prepared ahead of time, that they can know their own student, know what their needs are, know what their shortcomings or their weaknesses are, know where their strengths are, and be prepared to be very engaged with their own student to help them succeed. Because
Mhm.
coming to a co-op, most of us are moms that do not have training necessarily in working with a student with an IEP or, the different things. Um, and so we can't expect other parents necessarily to know the best way to interact with our child. And so is on the parent, I think, to make sure that they are willing to speak up, to offer suggestions, to be in class maybe with their student, whatever it is, but they have to have this willingness to be able to work with the co-op and not
Mhm.
take offense if somebody doesn't understand their child, but educate people. And then we all become better for that, because if you've never been exposed to a student that doesn't just sit quietly and listen and do their work, if that's your expectation of all the students, then you as a co-leader or a parent in that co-op are going to be sorely disappointed when you're faced with students that need to move or need
Mhm.
to process verbally or all the things that can't stay regulated. You're just going to be frustrated. But if a parent is willing to help educate that teacher,
Mhm.
then there's benefit there for everybody.
Mhm.
Well, there's
I
a
just
level of partnership that's
Yeah.
needed in any co-op, right? With any student, but maybe more so with a diverse learner, because, if a mentor or a teacher doesn't know the triggers that then leads to someone being dysregulated, that's a simple conversation, right? To equip
Mhm.
them. And it's the kind thing to do, is to have that clear communication um, and support. I mean, that if they want their student to succeed, then they are going to have to clearly communicate,
Mhm.
so that the teacher or mentor can do their best, right? And then
Mhm.
there needs to be lots of grace, because
Mhm.
we're all learning about all of the variety of students in our class, and how they
Yeah.
work best and what connects with them. And so, as Pam says, clear is kind,
Mhm.
so clear, open
Can I
communication is important.
can I give you an example? So I have two adopted children, and with that traumatic, beginning to life has come some difficulties with um, regulation. My daughter has severe dyslexia. We're dealing with a lot of things. And as a parent, I would go, if I were joining a new co-op, knowing what my daughter's weaknesses are and the scaffolding that she has to have, I would go and ask, are you willing to allow her to maybe not do every assignment because it's beyond her ability? Are you willing to let us use a text to or voice to text things for her to, these kinds of things? Are you willing to allow me to be in class with her so that I can maybe take notes because she can't do it? Or, just those things. If you already know as a parent some of the things that you have to do to help your student, go in with that information and ask the co-op, are you willing to make these modifications because she's not a typical learner? And so, but I believe it's good for her to be with her peers and for her peers to see that not everybody thinks the same way or learns the same way as they do. It's good for them too.
Yeah.
Can I add too, if a parent has, for example, they're working with a behavioral coach in the home, I would recommend that anything that's in place for that child would be shared with the teacher as well. Because
Absolutely.
sometimes those kiddos are very keyed into what the plan is and what the rules are. But if they go into a setting where they're not implemented and not shared in that setting, they'll know that they can have a little bit more wiggle room. I coach a family online, and mom shares with me often when the behavioral plan's updated, because sometimes I've seen certain behaviors even in a Zoom call. And, I've had to ask her about them. She goes, oh yeah, we just implemented new behaviors. And now I know when I'm working with him online, I can say, something maybe, hey, I think so-and-so has earned some great points today, because it's just going to be a motivator. Number one, you can even have in your co-op a checkoff sheet. So the teacher just signs off at the end of the day. You don't even have to say anything or have that conversation, but the student can have his, or her own checkoff sheet. And you just said, yep, full points, happy face, however you want to use it. But it's another way to communicate how that person's doing and did they meet their goals for that day. It's just a side thing. So does your co-op in particular have a questionnaire for parents or a way for parents to kind of log in or go online and put in notes for the child when they sign up?
We do a parent questionnaire and a child questionnaire at the beginning of class, kind of saying, what are your child's strengths? What are their weaknesses? Do I need to know any, maybe even allergies or, all those things, kind of what is your goal for your child in this class, so that the mentors and the parents have that baseline to begin with. I think that's really important to establish. We don't have a week by week format of that, but it's really important to get that information out there up front. And I would say, as a mentor, if a parent came to me with a behavioral plan, that is great, because now I know exactly what to do with this child and I don't have to sort of make it up and figure it out. So,
right. It's a great tool. And also I would just say, part of something I would do in my coaching is help a parent create that. Even if you don't have an outside source, there is a way to create that and present that to a co-op to say, these are his goals or her goals that we're working on. And we're looking for 5 stars today, or we're looking for, a happy face or whatever. And it's pretty powerful. It's pretty significant to just, if that's where the child is in their learning and that's the thing that they're used to, why not continue that? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dawn, I feel like that's you're such a great connector for homeschool co-ops and for the parents, because oftentimes parents have been hurt. Their kids have been rejected. in
Right.
situations because they've put, and the blame goes to both sides of it, because oftentimes parents just want to put their kids in and they just want to see how it goes.
Mhm.
And then it doesn't go well because there wasn't a plan. And
Right.
they're hurt and they're offended and they don't want to try again because they're afraid their kid is going to be rejected again. And oftentimes it means that they were rejected because they're not parenting their kid properly, quote
Right.
unquote,
Right.
because that is, whatever the person's opinion is, that they're not doing it right, because what worked for
Mhm.
their family, they should do that for your kid,
Right.
So I
Right.
think that you play a really crucial part in connecting homeschoolers with co-ops, because you can create that plan. You can help them, the parent, to understand, hey, we need your participation in this. We need your feedback. You know best. You need to tell us. You can then
Mhm.
translate it to the co-op and help the co-op to hear our strategies that you can use as a co-op. But the one thing I want to mention is that the parents also need to know they're coming into a place with broken people who have opinions, who don't do things right, and to expect that you will get hurt. Anybody that comes to a co-op at some point is going to get their feelings hurt.
That's a
It's
good
going to happen. But that is where we're a faith-based organization, that
Mhm.
what we're talking about is teaching people how to do it, Christ's principles. And that means suffering through when somebody makes a mistake, because
Right.
nobody's
Mhm.
intentionally trying to hurt you and your family.
Mhm.
And what I'm saying goes back and forth.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Right.
That's,
both ways.
yeah. And that's what community is about. That's why God
Mhm.
wants us to be together, because he gives us these principles to live by. You can't do it on your own. You
Yeah.
can't grow in your faith on your own. You
Yeah.
need people to sharpen your iron. You need one another to do it. And so when you come into it with that mindset, knowing that we're all going to step on each other's toes, we're not going to do it well,
Mhm.
we're going to mess up. And then, like Hannah said, we need to offer grace to ourselves, to one another, and be willing to enter into that messy space and work through this together. So it's got to come from both sides.
That's good. That's
I
good.
think parents of diverse learners oftentimes might look at a co-op as a way of escape.
Mm.
I'm going to take my kid and it's going to give me a break from having to deal with them all the time, because it's hard.
Mhm.
And I just want to say there's nothing wrong with feeling like you need a break, because
Mhm.
I have definitely been there, but not to expect that you're going to have people support you, but parents are still have to be the ones that are involved in guiding what's happening with their child.
Mhm.
And like you said, Pam, to not take offense if people don't um, behave the way that you think they should, or it's not a perfect solution, because frankly, it's a challenge and it's going to continue to be a challenge. But I think in community, the wins that you see and the wins that you get, they may be hard fought, but they are there. And I
Mhm.
have seen it myself. Like I said, I have two students, particularly of my own kids that are diverse learners, that have had regulation challenges,
Mhm.
learning challenges, and the opportunities for growth are so much more than if I just kept them home in this controlled environment and I can,
Right.
set everything up.
Mhm.
Um, so it's been growth for me, for my kids, and for the people that are around them that love them, because they do get loved by other people. And then that helps me just relax and say, my kids are going to be okay.
Mhm.
It's a journey, but to not walk that alone, I think is so important.
And I think parents, if they could understand that when you go into a co-op situation, what I would want to share with them is not to have these high expectations. that your child's going to sit there and look like every other child. They're going to behave
Right.
like every other child. But to understand the value for them just to be in community, for them to be exposed to other children, doing the expected behavior, enjoying learning, all that will trickle over into their heart and their soul and their experiences. But if you can take away your expected, well, I want this, take that away and just really go in with an openness that, you know what, I got to meet some really cool moms here. My little guy has a new friend today, and maybe it was a social thing. Maybe they didn't sit and write, for so long. I'll give you a quick story. I worked with a little guy in 3rd grade, pretty high up on the spectrum, very bright, but could not sit in a group setting. If he sat with me for 15 minutes out of 30 or 10 or 5, I was happy as could be. And then if he wanted to go over to another part of the room and just do what he wanted to do quietly, not, making any noise or distracting everyone, he was good to go. He was good. I was happy. I got 5 minutes. I got 10 minutes with him on task, doing what everyone else was doing. That I was happy as could be. And sometimes we have such high expectations that is not like, we feel like we can't do it because my child can't sit there like that. But it's okay if they need a break. It's okay if they want to go over and sit in a corner and play with some blocks or do something different. I think it's okay. I'm not distracted by that, though. You may have a teacher that would be like, oh, no, that's going to distract all the kids. All the kids are going to be curious. But you can teach your group to be okay and to stay focused. I've done that too, where I was just working, with a reading group, and I had that situation, and I was just able to say, it's okay. We're going to keep doing what we're doing. And you just stay on task. Have you guys ever had a situation like that? And how did you handle that?
I can think of an example. A few years ago, we had a family with some kids that had really gone through some serious trauma, and that came out in their behavior. They just lots of attention-getting behavior. And I had one of these kids in my class, and he would just blurt out things, all the time. And so we came up with a plan. We had a code word, basically, that when he was blurting and not being appropriate, we would use that code word. So it wasn't having me to be like a direct confrontation with him. That would help sometimes. And then sometimes he just couldn't manage. And so he would have permission to go and walk outside of the classroom and then come back when he was able to participate. It wasn't that he didn't want to be there. He did want to be there. But the thing that helped him the most was having relationship with the kids in the class where he wasn't feeling like he was on the outs, where he was the bad kid. So there was, if he had enough sense that he was welcome and that he was okay with them, then he did better in class. And that came from their interactions like at recess or at lunchtime when they were playing together. So that time can be fruitful in building relationships to help that student be able to interact appropriately with the other kids. So you just, I think each kid is individual. You have to have a plan as you go along and see, does that work? Well, that's not working. So let's try something else. But it's that back and forth with the family that has to be able to be there.
Now, Molly, I'm
Pam,
thinking of strategies, right? I have ideas for that. Can I just share real quick? If anyone's in that situation, one thing is oftentimes children that are auditory verbal processors, where they have to process what they're taking in verbally, they'll be big talkers in a group. So I always share with teachers to give frequent opportunities for students to look at their little friend next to them and tell tell them what they just heard or what they just learned. Or the teacher can say, okay, what are 3 things we just gathered from that? But oftentimes, if a child is overstimulated, not that you were doing it, but it could take just a little bit, they need to kind of regulate by talking. So when you like, I do movement breaks with kids, even on Zoom calls, when I'm working and coaching with kids, it's like, okay, I can see they're getting a little too overwhelmed. There's too much language from me for some reason, maybe not enough visuals. So it's like, okay, let's take a movement break. And so, or tell me one thing you heard me just talk about. What were we talking about? And so checking for understanding. I don't know if that would ever be helpful, but maybe someone needed that. So
one thing I want to add here is that in order for what Molly was saying and for what you're saying to happen, that communication is so critical. It needs to happen. It needs to happen more than one time. And I think sometimes on occasion when there are situations where a family or a kid has been rejected or they've had some sort of trauma like that, that it's hard for parents sometimes to receive feedback more than one time. They feel like, oh, I'm in trouble again. Oh, I'm in trouble again. So establishing up front that ability that we're going to communicate a lot, more than once. And so to not feel like you're getting in trouble here, we need your feedback, and we need to be able to give you feedback as to what's going on if that parent is not in the room at the time, so that we can help this student be successful, that we're a team together. And knowing that up front ahead of time, I think will help increase the success of that co-op. But if you're a parent that's already feeling like, oh gosh, my student, he's getting all this attention or she's getting all this attention because she's a verbal processor, and then it keeps coming, well, they were doing this again. You have to change your mindset. And you have to know that you're working together as a team. And that's where it's important to understand what the mission and vision of the co-op is. Because if their leadership is on board with you and they are like, yeah, we want to do this. We want your student being here is going to bless our community. Right. And we need you to be a part of our community, but we need to work at this. It's going to take work, but in order for all of us to experience the blessing, we all have to come to the table and be part of the game.
I love that. Yeah. And parents need to understand that there is going to be a learning curve. If you're in a group where, well, we've never had a little guy like this before, there's going to be a learning curve for everyone. And I agree with you, Pam, that you have to communicate the story. My question has always been, how much of a story does a parent have to tell the leaders, in this co-op? Because some kids have had pretty rough histories, right? When I know as an educator and a teacher, when I would go into a classroom for the first time, I'd have a stack of IEPs about all my students. And I don't tell anyone, but I would always do this thing where I'm not reading those. I'm not reading them. I want to meet this child first. I don't want to meet them through a history that is not that beautiful, or it's negative, or they have a behavioral plan. I like knowing, okay, there's a behavioral plan, but I don't want to focus on the nitty gritty of all the horrible things. So what would you all suggest that, how much should a parent share, right? Like I remember meeting a student in 6th grade, and the first thing I heard out of the teacher's mouth was his story. Oh, you should have seen him in kindergarten. You should have seen him. No, that's not who he is anymore. So how far back should they go? How much information would a co-op need? Do they need a copy of an IEP? I don't think so myself, but I would say just the accommodations page, if they're still relevant for that child, or that's something that a parent can write up. But what do you guys think on that?
Hannah, do you want to answer that?
We've never had a problem with an IEP. We have had some diverse learners with some challenges that we work through, but no one has come with an IEP, and I think that's more than okay.
For sure.
I think what is helpful for us to know for this co-op, does that mean that we need to know every trauma that they've had in their life? No. But if there are triggers If someone yelling, whether that's, in a negative sense or not, as a trigger, that would be helpful to know, just so that you can take that information into your class. What support they need. I mean, those kinds of things, like what would be helpful for me to know in the classroom? What are their triggers? How can I support them? What helps with their regulation? Those kinds of things, more so than all of the history, I think.
Yeah, I can speak for my own kids. I would not share their whole adoption history with a co-op. The fact that they are adopted is rather obvious, but I would just say, like you said, Hannah, like this is what triggers them. This is what it looks like if they're getting dysregulated. These are the things you can do to help keep them regulated. If you see this kind of behavior, this is what I would suggest, those kinds of things, whatever is going to be helpful to the leaders or to the mentors and the teachers in the class. But I think a student's private history should stay private. And we don't share those kinds of things if it's not absolutely necessary.
I want to add, Molly, too. I know something in our assessment, our online personality profile, it tells us the natural things that motivate a child. We like to focus on the strengths of the child. This is what my child's really good at. They're helpers. They want to help. So if you want them to pass out papers, that gives them an opportunity to move, to kind of connect with other kids. If you want them to help clean up at the end, anything that their strengths are, or even I know verbal praise. My child loves verbal praise, or just any kind of acknowledgement, or a touch on the shoulder. Good job. I like what you're doing. If you're walking around and you're the teacher checking the kids' work. But those positive reinforcers, there should be a list of those.
Yeah.
I think that's important for every student, honestly, to know what motivates and what connects to all of the students in your class is amazing information, because we want to speak life and encouragement into these kids and not just have our only interactions with them be critical, right? I mean, that is not life-giving.
Right. And we tend to lean toward that more, like those things that are blatant. How can I counteract that with a positive, right?
Yeah.
Right.
That's good.
One thing I want to add in regards to sharing your story is that sometimes, and I'm not saying you have to share all of the trauma and all of that, but sometimes when you have somebody who has no idea, who has their own opinions about how things should be run and how you should parent your kid and things like that, that sometimes it is helpful to share a little bit of something. But I would say when you are sharing, to be discerning about what it is that you're sharing. You don't have to share everything, but sometimes when I know that I've had friendships in the past where I have felt like somebody's behavior was really bizarre, and I was like, that's silly. Why do they have so much fear around this thing? And I had no idea. But then when she shared with me some of her background, I was able to then have compassion for her. I could have empathy. I could then turn and understand and love her in a way that she really needed to be loved. So though I think that, it's up to you. You need to discern, is this person trustworthy? Is this person worth the energy and the effort that it's going to take? Or do they actually want to learn about your kid and want to love your kid? Right. Ask yourself those things and then decide if you want to let them have some insight into what's going on in your world. So I would say, don't feel like you shouldn't share anything and that everything should remain private, but also don't share everything at all.
And I also want to share, be careful with labels, parents. I want to say this to our parents, because if you go into a new classroom with a new teacher and you're that sharing parent and you say, my child has ADHD. Well, guess what? ADHD individualized. There's no umbrella like this is ADHD. So
Right.
you may have a child that is quiet and sits there, but it has their imagination way out the window and isn't following directions. And then you call on them, and every time you try to pull them in, they're not listening. And you're thinking they're just being defiant or whatever. No, that could be inattentive. But and even though I'm a special education teacher, I have all the degrees and all that, I'm still really sensitive about labels, because labels hurt, number one. And then if I say, like I said earlier, on the spectrum, right? Like on the spectrum of autism, I can like describe that child and another child on the spectrum with autism. They're vastly different. So we have to really be more intentional about who is the child. That's why I love the self-portrait, because this is a true picture of who your child, a pretty close picture of who this child is. It gives more insight to a teacher or the person that's leading that than even if I wrote a book on my child, right? But I can say, these are the strategies that work. This is what the environment my child needs. They might get overreactive if the lights are too bright and they're sitting under these fluorescent lights for a long time. Things like that, just to be sensitive that even though, okay, the child is diagnosed with Down syndrome or ADHD, they're still an individual, and they have individual needs, and they're just unique, right? God made us all with fingerprints that no one else has. And he made us with beauty within us that no other child has. That this child is not like this child. We can't clump them all together. I don't know.
I think that's part of the beauty of homeschooling, because I know most people that homeschool resist those kinds of labels because they do see their kids as individuals. That's one of the reasons we homeschool, is so we can meet individual needs and not just put them through, the same education that everybody else gets. Like we want to do things differently for our kids because they have different needs. So I think that is one of the great things about not having IEPs, because a label can be passed along with your student on an IEP. Like we don't necessarily need to know that, right?
And it's so traumatizing. It was traumatizing to me to sit in an IEP meeting and have a reflection of a teacher's assessment on a child that is going in a report for the rest of that child's life. And I'm sitting there going, no, that's not him. That is not him. That's not my experience with him. I see him as gifted. I see him with all these wonderful strengths, and none of that was mentioned in a report like that. So it's a real tragedy, and it's very traumatic. It was traumatic for me. And my prayer was, God, I pray he never sees that. I pray he never, ever sees that, because the work that I was doing with him was vastly different. And he even said to me one day, I guess it's because I'm not normal. And I said, no, you are normal, because you think out of the box and you know who you are and what you want, and I just had to teach him a little bit of tolerance for the things that were boring and not interesting. And so, there's ways around that too. But anyway, thank you for saying that, because it is true. But I do want to say, Molly, I have worked with some parents who are still stuck in the mindset of trying to replicate the classroom into the home, because that's all they know. And they don't have a lot of coaching around that. That's, another piece of my work, being able to help parents rethink what is homeschooling. And I've had parents come to me and say,
we do that all the time.
Yeah, I know. Have you ever told a parent, stop homeschooling? Just observe your child, get to know your child. Just wait till I coach you a little more before you do anything else, And I had a mom do that. And for 2 weeks,
definitely have said, put away the books.
Put away the books. Just play. Yeah.
Well, there's a common advice when moms reach out, like on some of these Facebook groups, like I want to pull my kid from school and jump into homeschooling. And comment after comment is, please give some time and space to de-school, right? To let your kids settle into a new routine, for you guys to find a good rhythm. Because I think the tendency is to try and replicate traditional school at home, which is only going to cause a lot of frustration, right? Don't try to do that. It does. That's not the goal of homeschooling.
No.
I'm working with another lady right now. We're about to do a parent workshop on trauma from the education, from the public school, what kids often go through. She ended up homeschooling her daughter. When she brought her home, she just picked up and kept going, but she had to desensitize and deregulate her daughter's fears from math. And she didn't even know how traumatized she was, but every day she didn't get her math done fast enough. So they put her in the hallway during her specialist, and all the other kids were going to music. She had to sit like a bad shaming her in the hall to do her math. And so when mom tried to do math with her, she wouldn't do her math. And she was shut down. Oh, no. She was so traumatized with math. And the mother didn't even know this was happening.
Yeah.
And so this went on for almost a year. And so there's some of that. Like you may see resistance in your child and you're thinking, why is there resistance over math? It's not that hard, but you don't remember, maybe you need to dive into their experience. So there's a lot of pieces to that. Did we get off on a tangent, Pam? Help me.
A little bit, but I was going to say that I'll bring us back in, that that's one of the things that we need to consider, because if somebody is pulling their student from public school and now they're at home and they're homeschooling, and now they're like, okay, I'm ready for community now, they need to keep in mind that stuff is going to come with them to the co-op. And so that's why it's so important. That's one of those stories that it might be worth telling a teacher that situation, so that if certain behaviors come up, that they can have empathy and compassion for the student and understand that those things are going on.
Wow.
So yeah.
One of the things that you always say is, when you have a situation, rather than trying to like punish the child or discipline the child, to get curious and ask, why? What is going on? What is behind this behavior? Instead of seeing the child as bad, look at the behavior. The child is made in the image of God, but they're exhibiting this behavior for a reason. What is that reason? Can we get to the bottom of that? And then you can actually solve the problem. You can actually deal with the heart of that child, instead of just saying they are their actions. They aren't, right? They're acting in a way because they have a need, because they don't know how to express what that is. And so let's find that. Let's get to the root of that.
Yeah.
And I think when you have a label, right, that we were talking about a few minutes ago, it kind of chops off that curiosity, right? Because then you have a definition. Well, this is just who they are, but it's not who they are, right? And the thing that I really don't like about the labels is that it's describing the worst parts, like the parts that they're challenged with or struggling with the most, and then kind of holding that against them, right? When really they need support and love through that, not just to be cast off like, well, they just have ADHD, that's just the way it is, and we're just going to keep moving forward. Right. When you have that curiosity to try and understand what's behind their reaction to something or their behavior, I think that is just so nurturing. And I think we see them, right? At that point, we see who they are, and they are wonderful people that in this moment might be struggling. Thank goodness there's not a label for all of my negative attributes, because that would be quite long, right? And I would not want that broadcast everywhere. So
yeah. Well, that's why I think what you guys do is so important with the assessment, because I started to homeschool our mentor son, and we mentored him for 10 years. And when COVID happened, I started to homeschool him, and he needed help. And I wanted a label at that time because I knew that when he came to me, I didn't know what his issues were, but he was 4th, 5th grade level, and he was in high school at the time. And when he came, I did not know how to help him because I did not have the training, and mom did not want to tell me what the label was. And so it was really frustrating and hard for me because I didn't know what to look for or how to get resources to help him. And I wanted to, but I felt like my hands were tied and I was just throwing things up there. Had I had an opportunity to do an assessment like what you offer, Don, on him, then I would have been able to help him understand himself, where he needs to. Maybe he just needed more time. Maybe he just, maybe he needed different ways, but I didn't have a label. I didn't have anything. And so I felt like I didn't do him justice at all because I
You
was
needed
just
information maybe more than a label necessarily.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
needed something.
Right.
But
Well,
mom,
that learning style, one, and then the learning disposition. What does a child need? Do they thrive better in the morning or the afternoon? Where's their energy? What kind of a thinker are they? How do they approach learning? Are they curious? Do they need to learn through moving? I mean, all those components can really change the way you teach and approach a child. I know for myself, I mean, I'm working with a little guy on a Zoom call who is constantly moving. So I have to get out of my chair and do jumping jacks with them and all kinds of things, and which is good for me. I don't mind that. But I respect that in him. Like I can talk to him for about 5, 6, 7 minutes, and then we need a movement break. And he loves it. So we do marching exercises, tapping, back feet, front feet, all that. And he loves that. But you guys, I'm looking at our question to hear my next big one about online co-ops, which is something, that I was curious about, but I'm feeling like we're going to have to maybe do a part 2 if you guys are ever open, because this is such good information. And I'm sure parents have questions. And if parents do have questions today, feel free to ask your questions underneath this podcast. This is a recording that you're hearing, but we can still go back and answer those. And if you think we need a part 2 to answer more of your questions, we would love to do that. And I just want to say, we do have a lot of information on SPED Homeschool, Empowering Homeschool Conversations, where you can find access to coaches, where you can find access to courses, and all kinds of information there that I think could help you if you have. But I don't think we have anything like this on the co-op. So this is really exciting to me. That's to be experts on co-ops. Can I ask you, how do you all, other than your podcast and your Facebook page, how do you ever do personalized coaching with people who want to start a co-op? Do you do that as well?
Yeah, we sure do. In fact, we love to do that because through the podcast, we get to talk to a bunch of people, but it's great when we can say, what is the specific need that somebody has and how can we coach them? We can give them really clear guidance and steps to do that. So we love to coach people.
That's great. Well, I know you guys have coached me a little bit in the past, and it was amazing. I was like, whoa, and I just couldn't believe the insight and just the different things I wasn't actually thinking about, because we really need each other. I mean, this is why we're doing this today too, because we all have just great gifts that God has given us to share with the communities. And I would just say to parents too right now, please, please don't try to do this on your own. Right. I've had parents literally tell me, I am terrified to let my child into a co-op. I'm afraid they'll act out, they'll do weird things, whatever. Go baby steps. Even if you go in there for like a half an hour and you're just walking around getting to know people, and then you watch your child. How are they responding to this environment? Because the one thing I do want to say, and I'll say this in lieu of labels, Hannah, a child may have a label, but that label is often exasperated in a very structured classroom situation where they're not thriving. But when you put a child in a thriving environment like a co-op that is very nurturing with loving people that are there to love each other and help each other, oftentimes you'll see a totally different child. And that's something that we have to remember, that, just kind of like, well, when they're at home, they're kind of wild, but when they're at grandma's house, they're really happy. It's kind of like that, right? And and that's what I noticed as a resource teacher. Like my kiddos that were throwing chairs in the gen ed classroom were coming in and they were all sweet and loving, and teachers would get on the phone. What is he doing with you? He was just throwing a chair. He's sitting doing his work. He's really happy here. And I've had kids report that as well, because they felt safe. They felt seen and wanted and loved. And that's oftentimes what children get in a co-op, often, most times. So I would definitely recommend pursuing it with baby steps. Maybe it's once a week, maybe it's once a month. I don't know.
Dawn, may I add too, for your listeners out there, I just want to really encourage them, if they are listening to all these different podcasts and they're trying to piece something together on their own, I would just really highly recommend that they do not do that. That they get the information that they need to help their kid be successful, help them be successful, and your SPED homeschooling will help them to do that. Your individual coaching will help them to do that. So I know that in what we do, we tend to listen to all of the podcasts, try to figure it out on our own, and then it just takes so much time and energy and effort to do that. And so that's why we offer coaching. And I know that's why you offer coaching. And when it comes to something like your student and that trauma and the rejection that is just so prevalent in the way that they live their lives, get the coaching, get the assessment, get the information, be empowered so that you can help your student, help your family, help you be successful in that way. It's invaluable. And so I really believe in what you're doing. And I think that you can be such a great connector for homeschool co-ops and for parents of diverse learners. So thank you. Thank you for letting us be on here and sharing with you and talking through some of this stuff. I hope it's been a blessing for you.
It's a blessing. You're a blessing. And I want to say that about curriculum too, because I think parents get super overwhelmed. I know this is our last minute, but when a lot of parents come to me just saying, I don't know where to begin, they're overwhelmed. They're bombarded. If you look on a Facebook page, 10 people will offer 10 different links to what they should be doing. And we personalize that. We take an assessment, an online assessment that the parent or child can figure out. And then we customize and personalize. Even if you're using, I love the good and the beautiful. Okay, let's customize that for your child and how they learn. So anyway, there's just so many great parts to that. But do you guys have any last words you want to share today, or are we good?
I think we're good. Thank you so much. And just a word of encouragement to parents who are out there with special needs learners. Just get the help that you need and the support that you need, and you don't have to do it on your own.
That's so true.
So yeah.
Well, I hope everyone enjoyed this today, and I thank you all again. If you're interested, go on to Empower Homeschool Conversations. You can reach out to me at my Gmail account or find me as one of their coaches. Look up their consultants. I'm on there with some other amazing people, and we all have different services that we offer. So I just thank you, ladies. God bless you, and keep up the good work. Hang in there. Keep on keeping on. And if you ever need me, you know where to find me.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks, Dawn.
Oh, you're welcome. Everyone stay right there.
This has been Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool, a nonprofit that empowers families to home educate diverse learners. To learn more, visit spedhomeschool.com